Firstly, with regards to cases, the advice I have from the National Incident Centre is that, again, there are 0 cases of community transmission in Australia. Significantly, 0 lives lost and 0 patients in ICU with COVID-19 in Australia. So that's a really important outcome. Importantly as well, this is the 12th consecutive day of 0 cases of community transmission in Australia. That's a testament to the work of our medical professionals, our public health teams, but Australians everywhere for the way in which they've observed the distancing requirements, the way they've protected each other, the way they've come out for testing with 12.88 million tests conducted in Australia on the latest advice that I have. All of these things have helped keep Australia safe. At the same time, we've seen some agonising global figures. Over the last 24 hours, the advice I have is 630,000 cases, 17,422 lives lost. That's an astonishing figure in one day. And then over the last 15 days, the National Incident Centre's advised me that across the world, we've seen approximately 9 million diagnosed cases of COVID-19 and, incredibly, over 200,000 lives lost. In terms of those trends, we have seen a slight slowing of global numbers in the last week as opposed to the previous week, which is positive. Sadly, the number of lives lost has continued to grow because they reflect the cases 2 and 3 weeks ago in many circumstances. All up, 101 million cases diagnosed around the world and over 2.18 million lives lost. All of that puts into perspective the great challenges that we've had in Australia. And whilst it's been difficult, we have been mercifully spared the trauma and agony on such a massive scale from around the world. There's been loss, there's been heartbreak, there's been hardship, and we acknowledge all of those, all very important, but that comparison between where Australia is and where the rest of the world is, I think is an immensely powerful reminder of Australia's circumstances. If you'd asked me a year ago, can you imagine a circumstance where Australia was at 0 cases but the world was at over 630,000 cases in a day? I would have struggled to have been so bold as to make that prediction. So our efforts are extraordinary. In terms of New Zealand, I've just spoken with the Acting Chief Medical Officer, Professor Michael Kidd. His advice is that after talking with New Zealand health authorities, there have been no further community cases. They're doing a tremendous job in terms of widespread testing of staff relating to the hotel quarantine facility, guests, contacts and community, and that this provides a basis for them to be reconsidering the current travel pause for the green zone on a 24-hour basis. So they'll be considering tomorrow, and if there are continued excellent results out of New Zealand, which is commensurate with their entire performance over the course of the pandemic, then we hope to be in a position to resume that in the coming days. And I think that should give hope to everybody who is looking at friends or family arriving from New Zealand. We've had over 16,500 Australians arrive since October the 16th, or people coming to Australia from New Zealand, whether they're returning Australians or New Zealanders or other nationals that are coming from New Zealand. 16,500 arrivals since October 16. We'll continue that program, and we look to be able to recommence it at the earliest possible time. The news is good, and the AHPPC, which has been fearless in its medical advice, and we have been scrupulous in following that advice, we'll be reviewing every 24 hours with a view to commencing as early as possible. And if things continue as they are, we hope to have good news before the end of the weekend. Now, finally, with regards to vaccines, I can reaffirm the advice provided by the Prime Minister and myself after working with our major vaccine suppliers, that Australia remains on track for a late February commencement of the vaccine rollout. Our timeframes have been reaffirmed by both Pfizer and AstraZeneca during the course of this week. In addition, we've seen positive test results for the third of our major vaccine suppliers, Novavax, an up to 89% efficacy in its major clinical trial in the UK. That's called a phase 3 trial. And that also gives us a sense to be able to step back and reflect that the world has a small number of vaccines that are in advanced phase 3 clinical stage or beyond. We've been fortunate to select 3. All up, we made 5 vaccine contracts: Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Novavax, the University of Queensland, and what's called the COVAX facility, an international facility. 4 out of the 5 are proceeding, and at this stage we expect a strong vaccine supply with the commencement in late February, the completion on track for before the end of October. And there'll be challenges. Every day we see the stories from around the world. Every day we will see stories from around the world, but having a sovereign vaccine manufacturing capability, having strong contracts, and being well prepared puts us in one of the strongest positions of any nation. I'll start by taking calls from over the phone. I think Natasha is first.
Thank you very much, Minister. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that there have been manufacturing problems at the CSL in relation to the AstraZeneca vaccine. Early on in the process, as far back as November, there were low yields being experienced. Can you please update us as to that? And can I also ask, in relation to the 50 million doses of vaccine being produced by CSL, is it guaranteed that all of those 50 million doses will go to Australians, or is there any possibility that any of it could be shipped offshore to fulfil AstraZeneca's other contract treatments in Europe?
Sure. With regards to the 50 million doses of onshore production of the AstraZeneca vaccine by CSL, firstly, we're not just on track, but we announced this week that we're ahead of schedule for the delivery of the CSL doses. The first doses have been brought forward to an expected late March supply of approximately 1 million per week, and our current guidance is that we will receive approximately 2 million doses during the course of late March from CSL of the AstraZeneca vaccine, as it's produced here in Australia. So I'm not aware of any specific details with regards to earlier questions, but I can say that this week we've had guidance that brings forward the supply of CSL. So as we look around the world, we recognise that countries such as the United States and Canada, the UK, we see the European nations that are all managing the great challenge of production issues in both the Pfizer and the AstraZeneca vaccine. Our figures take into account the production challenges and the European regulatory conditions, and so that was already built into the statement on Monday, but it's been reaffirmed that we remain on track. Always we're subject to production and distribution and shipping challenges anywhere in the world, but having that domestic onshore production is a national security. And with regards to the 50 million doses, they're a direct contract between the Australian government and CSL, and therefore delivery here in Australia. And we don't see any circumstances under which they wouldn't be provided in full to Australia. Okay, Jane.
Hello. Just in regards to, you talk about potential shipping issues and that sort of thing. The reports today about the EU potentially withholding or delays in delivering vaccines. Can you respond to that? And also seeking a response to Germany's claims on AstraZeneca and there not being enough evidence that that the vaccine is effective in people aged over 65.
Sure. With regards to the EU, the current production and regulatory settings had been taken into account in our earlier guidance. But I have spoken with the Foreign Minister, Maurice Payne, today, and the Foreign Minister has confirmed that DFAT will be making representations through the World Health Organisation and through various European agencies and to relevant countries about ensuring that our supply is guaranteed on a continuous basis. We understand that the whole world has to deal with supply shocks, and therefore our volumes have been appropriately set out this week. But the Foreign Minister has confirmed today that Australia will be making representations through the World Health Organisation and through Europe with regards to ensuring the vaccine supplies and certainty for Australia. Then in relation to AstraZeneca, we've had a very clear position that the TGA, or the Therapeutic Goods Administration, makes full consideration of all data available to them. That's clinical trial data, that's the position of other regulators, and they very clearly have said that they will make a decision, and based on safety and effectiveness, and that safety has and always will be the number one priority. I understand yesterday that Professor John Skerritt, the head of the TGA, spoke with the Senate committee. In particular, he noted that there was no evidence in relation to any risk with regards to effectiveness or other elements with regards to over 65s being negative. But they'll take the advice of our vaccines advisory group led by Professor Cheng, and in addition to that, they will take into account all of the information. The UK has reaffirmed its own guidance today with regards to the safety and effectiveness of that particular vaccine for over 65s. I understand that Professor Adam Finn, who's a member of the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation in the United Kingdom, said we have no concerns about the safety of the vaccine in any age group, and they will continue to do that. So countries will take different approaches. Our approach will be led by what we believe to be the best medical regulator in the world, the Therapeutic Goods Administration. They're strong, they're independent, they're fearless, they're exactly what you'd want, they're thorough, and we'll be guided by them on all of their judgments. Sally.
On the AstraZeneca vaccine, first question, do you have a backup plan if the TGA makes a similar recommendation and says don't give it to over 65, would you need to order more of, say, the Pfizer vaccine? And then separately, on the Novavax vaccine, what role do you see that vaccine playing in our rollout strategy, and when could we see that come to Australia?
Sure. Firstly, with regards to AstraZeneca, again, the assessment, approval and any terms or conditions are exclusively a matter for the Australian medical regulator, the TGA. But as a government, in working with the committee led by Professor Brendan Murphy, we're prepared for a range of rollout options depending on any conditions that are imposed or elements that are put in place by the TGA. So we are already prepared for all of the possible options. We have a total vaccine supply of approximately 140 million doses for a population of 25.5 million, requiring 2 doses per person. So we have strong levels of vaccine, but we also have a range of options for rollout which have already been prepared for all circumstances. So I think that's a really important question. With regards to Novavax, again, we'll have to see and understand the full international data, and that will be both the Vaccines Advisory Committee and that will be the work of the Therapeutic Goods Administration. We're expecting that Novavax will be available, as we've always set out, in the second half of the year. So it could serve one of two purposes. It could be either a primary vaccine, if that were required, and we're always in the hands of medicine and evidence, or secondly, it could be a subsequent vaccine if, like the flu, further years of vaccination are required. And Professor Murphy this week and all of our medical advisors have been absolutely clear throughout that we don't yet know, not Australia, but the whole world does not yet know the longevity of immunity. That will be determined in what will be the greatest global vaccination program the world has yet seen. And there will be ample evidence for the world, but that evidence isn't yet known. So Novavax serves those two purposes of being either there as a primary vaccine option, pending any issues that may arise with regards to either the efficacy or the production of our current vaccines, or, as is more likely the case, it's there as the potential for subsequent vaccination if any further revaccination were required on a global scale, simply on the basis of immunity. So the strategy has been very carefully constructed. I have to say, as has always been the case with Professor Murphy and the extraordinary team that's been built around him, they've considered all of the options and contingencies, and we've worked to make sure that all of the options and contingencies, and I know for Australians, this is a period where they look around the world and they understandably and rightly ask questions about global production and global supply and global efficacy. We've prepared with 5 different options initially. University of Queensland sadly didn't proceed, but we backed the decision that was taken not to proceed with that. We now have 4 different vaccine options through Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Novavax and the COVAX facility. We have 140 million doses. We have an onshore strategy, and then we are able to vary it, as we did, for example, as we did when we saw that we needed to adapt once the University of Queensland wasn't available. What we built into the existing contracts we were able to trigger with regards to options. So that flexibility is there, and we recognise that it's a fast-moving situation, but the deep long-term strategy of commencing in late February, subject to ensuring that shipping continues as envisaged, and completion in particular by the end of October remains on track. Okay, Noor.
Thank you, Minister. Just on another issue, can you give us any information about what impact the UK travel ban will have on Australians trying to get home via Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and will this necessitate further government assistance flights out of that region?
So on the particular airline impacts, I'll respectfully leave that for the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Home Affairs to address. But what we have shown is that if more flights are needed, more will be provided. If more flights are needed, more will be provided. We added an extra 20 specific charters, which Simon Birmingham announced a few weeks ago. They were done to make sure that more Australians could come home. So we'll have to examine the impact of those particular changes, which we understand and which we respect. And the guidance to Australians is very, very clear, and the Prime Minister has been clear. If more flights are needed, more will be provided. And then we have Sue Dunleavy from News Corp.
Minister, thank you very much. We've seen the emergence of some highly infectious new variants of the COVID-19 virus, in particular the South African version. Reporting today, the Novavax team said that its vaccine was far less effective against this variant than it was against the oldest strains of the virus. Moderna and Pfizer have also announced that they are working on a special booster variation of their vaccine to cope with the South African variant? Is Australia in talks with these pharmaceutical companies to purchase supplies of the newer types of vaccines that would be effective against this highly infectious variant?
Sure. Look, I'd be cautious on making judgments on existing vaccines against the variants at this point in time. That will remain a matter for the Vaccines Advisory Committee and the medical regulator. We have very strong relationships with the companies, and at this stage we don't have advice that further changes are required. But if we do receive that advice, then as we've done, one of the hallmarks of our approach has been to prepare and to adapt. Often that preparation will be done behind the scenes because of a highly competitive international environment. A lot of our work was done behind the scene on masks, behind the scene on test kits, behind the scene on ventilators. And the purchasing agreements which we've had have been done behind the scenes with relation to vaccine. It is a highly competitive, highly commercial environment, so I hope you'd understand that we wouldn't preempt those. But I think what Australians can be assured is, as we've shown all along, with over $18.5 billion invested, being ahead of the curve with regard to masks, test kits, ventilators, getting in early to have the security of contracts both offshore and onshore, and one of the highest dosing rates in the world, that if more is needed, more will be provided. And I think that's an important question, so we're prepared. But at this point in time, the advice remains that the vaccines that we have are the right vaccines for the circumstances. But if as this pandemic continues to evolve, if as strains evolve, then we're in a position to be able to adapt. All right.
I also asked about the national booking system that patients don't have to use to book an appointment with their GP to get a vaccination. When will that roll out, and could you explain to people how that's going to work?
Sure. So our goal for the public is to have a very simple access approach. So as you can phone your GP, you can phone the state clinics, or you can come through a single front door. So to give people different options, because they'll all be in different circumstances, but it all ends up with them being able to easily book. And so we're working quietly behind the scenes with the states to make sure that we've got that simple single front door for people, whether it's online, whether it's through telephone, depending on their circumstances. They'll also be able to go direct to their GPs. I can update that we were looking for up to 1,000 points of presence around the country. Whilst the expression of interest process for general practices is still not closed yet, we now have well over 1,000 general practice expressions of interest alone. So well ahead of schedule, more than anticipated. And I do want to thank our general practice community. The numbers have been faster and greater than we'd ever anticipated, and that means that more Australians will have better access all around the country. And I think that's a great place to finish. And again, 0 cases today, 0 lives lost, 0 Australians in ICU, and 12 consecutive days of 0 cases. And that's a testament and a tribute to the work of Australians everywhere. Thank you.